Subscribe now.
I immediately knew the first thing that we had to do was gather. When I was driving up to that rally, I remember I was scared, you know, because I texted one of my buddies on the police department, and he said, I heard that Chief Brown is going to arrest every person there. Which, you know, that's a big deal. It's like you get arrested, but then I thought about it, it's like, no, this is our First Amendment right under any circumstance, and so we're going to challenge it.
We're excited we have Eric Moutsos. This is a second part because we recorded him at the Kimber Academy yesterday. He didn't really get to tell his story very long. People watched the video, which is great, and we'll have links on here. One of the things you just touched on briefly was what happened to you up in Salt Lake. And when can you just tell people that maybe have never heard of you before, don't know anything about you, just kind of your background and some of the things that you're involved in. You've been involved, obviously, in a lot of these political rallies, these fights for freedom, things with patriots all over. Tell us more, a little bit about your story and the crazy thing that happened up in Salt Lake.
Yeah, well, it's crazy that I even became a cop to begin with, you know, because growing up, I wasn't into any of the things that I'm into now. I was kind of living a rebellious life in high school. I was challenged to, when I was 18, I was challenged to read the Book of Mormon. And it was after a backyard boxing match, actually. So,
really?
Yeah, we were going around and we were doing these brawls, like full-on kind of fight club brawls, and there was like cash prizes involved. I mean, all illegal, right? And this really tough Polynesian kid that I boxed, he came to my house the next day with white shirt and tie, scriptures. I didn't want him to be there because I didn't want anything to do with it at the time. And he challenged me to read. And that's when my journey started on a deeper level spiritually. I always believed in God. I always knew it, but I just didn't want to come to grips that I needed to change my life. And so...
how old were you?
I was 18.
Okay.
And so
my nephew over in Lehigh got in trouble for almost the exact same thing. They were filming it and putting it on YouTube, though. Yeah,
I have that same fight on YouTube, or at least part of it. And so, but I mean, that was 20 years ago. And so that's when I finally gained a testimony myself, like an actual witness where people can say, I know. That's when I gained it, was when I finally prayed about it. And so I went to my bishop.
You grew up here in Utah?
Yeah, that was in Taylorsville, Utah.
Okay.
So then I went to my bishop and talked to him about my experience, and then he got me ready to go on a mission. It took a year to get ready to go on a mission, and it was it was hard, like trying to transition out of that life into the new life. And I finally got on my mission, and I came down with one of the worst depression, anxiety, whatever it was, on my mission. And I wasn't gone for very long, and I ended up coming home after 3 weeks. And
now, where did you go?
I went to California, Arcadia, California. And I went to, I started on like antidepressants, came home. I didn't want to see anyone. I hid myself in my basement because, and people are asking me like, like the AP in the mission field, well, what did you do? Yeah. And I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, every 15 minutes just bawling. And that was really hard because I felt like a total failure. And I came across this. I was in my parents' basement because I didn't want to see anyone. And I came across this Yahoo karaoke chat room, which was a country karaoke chat room. I've never heard of anything like this. And these people are singing through the computer, and I'm like, what? And they got down to me and they said, it's your turn. And I couldn't sing, but I started practicing a Garth Brooks song. And so then I sang into the computer, and that's when all the people were doing their little emojis, like, oh, you're good, you're good. And so music's kind of put a new life in me. And so I entered a karaoke contest at a bar when I was 21 in Salt Lake, and I won. And then I entered another contest called Nashville Star. And it's kind of like, you know, kind of like American Idol, but a ghetto version.
Country version.
Yeah, ghetto version of it.
My folks, by the way, are from Miles City, Montana, that had the bucking horse sale. I've sat at a table with Charlie Daniels before, actually going there, and it's a city that actually has more bars than churches, believe it or not.
Wow.
But country is huge there, and that's karaoke's big too.
Yeah, yeah. So then I made it to the regional finals, and then just by the grace of God, I got a phone call from Evander Holyfield, the only 4-time heavyweight champ of the world.
Wow.
And he had a record label. And it's crazy because I watched his fights growing up. You know, we would have all the people come over and we'd pitch in $5 to pay for the pay-per-view to watch him fight Mike Tyson. Yeah. Right? And so I know that was inspired that we connected. And now the next thing I know, I'm in his basement playing, and I didn't know the guitar very well. So I'm playing like 3 chords that I know, singing this song. And we just clicked, you know, and he said, I want to put you on my record label. So I was on his record label for about 4 years. And I was traveling back and forth to Nashville, recording. The guy that found Tim McGraw, his name was Mike Borchetta. He wanted to do a deal with Evander, but that's when I first got married and we had our first child. That was, 15 plus years ago.
Evander, by the way, he's a big-hearted guy, isn't he?
He's amazing.
People don't realize
he's amazing. He's a God-fearing man. Yeah. I mean, still to this day, he sends me scriptures every morning on my phone. He'll text me scriptures, and I'll send him, quotes from prophets and things like that. And but he's one of my best friends. But so I opened up for Colin Ray at that point, and I wanted to get this country music career going. But it never just sat right with me. It was like I wanted to do it, but I wanted a family, and I just had this. There was just this pull. Every time I'd go to Nashville, it just felt wrong, but I wanted that so bad. And long story short, I ended up not doing that. I got into police work somehow. This guy in my ward, he was on the gang unit in the SWAT team. He said, "Hey, do you want to come out and do a ride-along?" And so I went out with him, and it was one of the funnest nights of my whole life. Like, we were going on hot calls, man with a knife. We went on bar checks, all these things, and I didn't want to come home. And so I told my wife, I said, I think I'd like to do this. And she said, you'd be a good cop. And so then I went to school. And
so you felt like it's your true calling there.
I did. Yeah, I felt called to it. And I felt like it's exactly what I was supposed to do. And I didn't know anything about it, really, because I didn't realize that you actually have to now study the law in order to enforce it. So I went to school at the community.
Was it your sense of justice, do you think, with some of the other things?
I don't know. I don't know. But I felt like I wanted to help people, but I also wanted an exciting job because I don't want to sit at a desk, Yeah. And so I was at the community college, and the first instructor, not really an instructor, but a speaker came to us, and we hadn't yet been hired on. There was like 25 of us. We didn't even have patches. So we just had our blue shirts, because once you go through the school, then you start putting in your application.
We had a brother-in-law that just went through police school, and I didn't realize that, but yeah, then you got to find a job afterwards.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, it was really, really competitive at the time. And that was before Obama administration. That was before all the attacks on the police in 2006, 2007. Right around that area. He came in 2008. And so it was difficult to get on. But this guy named Chief Randy Johnson, he was a police chief of the Granite School Police. And he came and he said, he gave his presentation. He asked the question, he said, who do you work for? And we all sat there, and a couple people raised their hand. They said, well, we work for the city. We work for the community. And one person says, well, we work for you. And he just rolled his eyes and he said, I want to tell you something that I never, ever want you to forget. He said, you work for God, Never forget it.
Wow.
And I remember just getting chills all over my body, like, oh my gosh, like, because I felt it. I felt it. And I thought, they're going to talk about this stuff in law enforcement. Like, they're going to talk about religion in law enforcement. But the sad thing was, I never heard anything again. I never heard that again. Until at the very end of, and I'll go back to this, but I want to tie this together. One of my friends at the police department ended up taking his life, suicide. And they gave his kind of the last call, like over the air, kind of his farewell. And so they said his badge number 3 times, and then they said, Godspeed. And it just hit me. And I remember thinking, oh, so we can talk about God at the very, very beginning of our careers. And the very, very end, his name is mentioned. But nothing in between. And I believe that's one of the reasons why we're in such a mess, is because we've taken God out of the equation of our society. Because people think that the separation of church and state means that we can't talk about our faith when we're at work in the public square. You can't talk about that. No. The separation of church and state was meant so that the government couldn't force one particular idea on the people.
Exactly.
At gunpoint. Yeah. Including irreligion, meaning no religion. So you can't talk about it as its own form of religion. Because now they're suppressing ideas on people. So it's a godless idea.
This whole thing with the church, with our churches, has really bothered me a lot. Here you have places like Walmart and Home Depot and big corporations that they're allowed as much business as they want. And everybody is corralling to them. They're just corralling them to a few places. But they're shutting down churches. So you going to Walmart is more essential. Oh, and the liquor store. And making sure that you have your abortion done. Those are all essential. So you can go to Walmart, you can go to Home Depot, you can go to the liquor store, you can get your abortion, but you can't go to church. I see this article come out from KSL News that said, the state of Utah and the health department will allow to go to church, but you must social distance. Here you have the dictators of our state saying we're going to allow you to go to church. And that fired me up, because they do not have the authority to give permission for anyone to go to church. And so I had the idea to do a spiritual revival. Not on the same grounds that we're going to believe theologically the same, but that our rights are given from our Creator, not government. And I knew that it was the right thing to do.
So I got into law enforcement. I really, really loved it. The first several years I loved it, just hard charging. And when I say hard charging, like just call to call.
So you were a street cop during all this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I got hired on with Salt Lake City Police. And my mom warned me to not go there. She's like, it's a very liberal place. I'm like, okay, so, they pay the best. But what I started to see was, in order to get transferred or promoted or looked at as like a good officer, they look at your stats. That's how they judge you, right? So if you want to go to a different squad, like a specialty unit, like the bike squad or the motorcycle squad or the SWAT team, the first thing they do is pull your stats. Well, how many arrests does he have? How many tickets does he do? How many calls does he go on? Like, so when you're a new cop, that's what you do. You got to get your stats up. So naturally, what do you have to do? So for example, and I didn't realize this at the very beginning. I didn't understand it. So naturally, they, like one of the things that they said at the very beginning, or one of the sergeants said, they'd give us incentives, right? They'd say, hey, the first person to get like a yellow Toyota gets a couple hours off. As far as, ticketing. So now, could you imagine being that yellow Toyota? But as a cop, because there's so many laws, you're gonna find something on someone. Like if you're in a traffic and you're following someone, everyone breaks the law.
So it's not quite racial profiling.
Well, yellow
car.
Yeah. So, but I didn't understand that problem. But then it started getting worse and worse as the years went on. So, for example, you know, the first person to get this or to get that, or going back a little bit more, you know, in field training. So when you're an FTO, like a field training officer, so you're not quite yet on your own, but you're with a trainer, and the trainer is helping you go through all these calls. So we've got this book, you know, that's this thick of all the calls that we have to pass off or at least talk about. So either go on the call, so like a suicide, for example, or a traffic accident, or an impound, or a homicide, or a, you know, whatever it is, we've got to check it off. Okay, you've done it. So it's checked off, so you're good to go. So I had not yet done an impound, okay, where you impound a vehicle. Well, we pulled this lady over, and I'm with my trainer, and her tags were expired 1 month. So her tags were expired, well, they were actually expired 4 months, but after 3 months, on the 4th month, you can now impound the car. And so I pulled her over, and he's like, all right, we're going to impound the car. And when I talked to the lady, I could just see it. Like she had car seats in the back, and I told her, I just said, hey, we got to impound your car, you know. And she starts crying. And so I was trying to make the deal with my field training officer, like, hey, I think we should just give her a ticket. It's like, no, we're going to impound it. She can afford it, you know. If she can afford cigarettes, she can afford this. And my conscience was screaming at me, and I didn't listen to it.
I think that's fascinating because I think most people really have a lot of love, respect, maybe is a better word, for law enforcement. And with all the stuff that we've heard the last year, you know, in our society, it's kind of interesting to get an inside view, because you're obviously a good person that didn't fully understand that it's the system somewhat that compromises these cops, right? It's not that bad human beings are going in at all, like the media would try to paint it. It's like, just tell us a little bit about that.
Look, there's so many laws on the books, right? And when you have, and I'm not saying every police department's like this, because it's not. Some of them are well funded, but when you have an underfunded agency, they have to get their numbers in order to get the money, or just simply they want to promote. So if you've got a sergeant that wants to promote to lieutenant, he wants to show how. Write a lot of tickets. So when I was on the bicycle unit, our sergeant came to me, and he says, "You're gonna do 5 tickets a day, misdemeanors per day." And I was like, no. And I told him no. I said I won't do it. And that was the beginning to the end. But I tell these stories because up until that point, there were so many times I violated my conscience in the name of the law, right? With impounds, with tickets, with little things. And one of my friends taught me a really good lesson. We were on another impound, and the parking enforcement gal, she had been following this van, a homeless family's van, where they couldn't park anywhere downtown. So, but it was the husband, the wife, and I think there was 4 kids. And so she finally found him after all these tickets that they couldn't pay. She finally found him. She's like, we're going to impound it now. So they call me and my buddy over there, and we've got to now secure the scene. So we're standing there, and she's got the tow truck coming, and he's crying. He's like, this is everything I own. There's nowhere for us to park. Like, so they have to park their van in order to go in the homeless shelter to sleep with their family. And as the tow truck's getting there, my heart's beating like, she's got to say something, but I didn't do it. But my friend did. My friend said, we're not impounding it. And everyone just kind of sat there, and the tow truck's like, hey, I got to get paid. So my friend busts out money and pays the tow truck. Wow. And he's a cop. So the parking enforcement, now she's mad, right? Because she's like, you guys are here to help me. So she calls her supervisor. My friend calls our supervisor, and it goes up the chain. And so I had this thought to rush over to a hotel that I knew the desk person at the hotel, this guy. I said, hey, can we park this car downstairs or down in your basement or, you know, underground parking with his family? He's like, yeah, bring it here. So I told him, I'm like, go park it. And we never saw him again. I never saw him again. And so the question is if we would have had that car impounded, how long would they have stayed homeless for? Right? And so that changed me. And then I met a woman named, she was a nuisance. In my book, it's called Dispatched. It's actually on my webpage at ericmoutsos.com, free. So you can read it for free there. I tell a story about a woman named Debbie. Her name's Debbie in the book. But she was a total alcoholic. I mean, just a nuisance. Like, everywhere she went, just
a repeat annoyance.
Oh, my gosh. And so finally one night I just went off on her. Like, I just like, how did you get to this point? You know, like, look at yourself, look at your life. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And she just breaks down. She starts telling me how she one day, long ago, she had it all. She had a family, she had a successful job. And one day her husband and all her kids were hit and killed in an automobile accident. And I immediately pictured my family, you know, and what I would do. And she goes to stand up and she couldn't find her Bible, right? She's like, where's my Bible? Where's my Bible? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, you really read your Bible? I mean, I'm judging her. And so that night I kept having this thought, you need to get her a set of scriptures. And I'm trying to kick the thought out of my mind, like, no, I'm not doing this. And so the next day I went and got her a set of scriptures, and I knew her name because, you know, I dealt with her so many times, so I got it embossed. Is that what it is? Embossed, where you put the name?
Engraved.
Yeah, engraved in the scriptures. And so now I'm looking for her the next day, right? And I'm still like tugging at my conscience, like, should I do this? Should I not? Like, am I crossing the line? And so then I heard where she was and raced over there. And because one of my friends had stopped her, and I could hear her in the back, like, you know, and so I rushed over there and I gave her the set of scriptures, and she just grabbed me and just hugged me, and I just hugged her, and I could never ticket her ever again, you know, because, and maybe that's fine, but that changed me.
Well, I think it's pretty apparent that maybe you weren't supposed to be. God knew you weren't going to be a police officer for that long, but those experiences that you had and that understanding and the story that you're going to share now, I mean, about it, yesterday, you just touched on it, and we'll show part of that in this video, but maybe you could tell people what led up to, which was in the headlines and people heard about it, how you're actually let go from the police. Well,
ultimately, I wouldn't do the quotas. I recorded my sergeant, because I never got written up for it, right? Well, why didn't I get written up for it? Well, because they didn't want to admit that there was quotas, right? Because they get federal dollars. Police departments get federal dollars off of certain calls. So X amount of domestics, X amount of whatever it is, they get to turn it in for grants. So they need these numbers in order to get the big money.
But they were taking note, even though it wasn't official write-ups.
And so that's where it started. And I finally made it over to the motorcycle unit. I had to battle to get over there because my name was kind of tarnished because I kind of stood up to them, right? And the reason why I go back and tell you the stories of how I didn't follow my conscience was because how many times I didn't follow my conscience allowed me to finally start to realize it. And how I started to realize it was because I found one of Cleon Skousen's books, The 5,000 Year Leap, and I was reading that as a cop.
Wow.
And so that's
a great book.
That's what got me to start to understand the Constitution and how this country was built. I didn't know any of that stuff before.
And he was a cop, right? Wasn't he the Salt Lake
Police? He was
police?
the Salt Lake Police chief.
Wow.
So I can't wait to meet him one day in the next life. And so when I got over to the motorcycle unit, we had to do 20 tickets a day. Okay? 20 points. That was our goals. 20 points. So one ticket is a point, or 10 point, or one DUI is worth 10 points. So I decided that I was going to do DUIs because I believed in it a little bit more than tickets. And so I was their number one DUI officer. I mean, by far. I think I had 160 or so, 170 DUIs in 1 year. And they would incentivize us. You know, they'd give us an hour off. Every DUI arrest, they'd give us an hour off under the table. Right? And that's the problem, is that now they're incentivizing arrests. Finally an order came down this was in 2013 or 14. 2014 maybe. An order came down the chain that they wanted 5 of us to celebrate in the LGBT parade, in our police uniforms. So they wanted 5 of us on the motorcycle unit to do the celebration maneuvers in front of the parade. And as soon as I saw that order, I was just like, okay, do they want us to do like the wedge? The wedge is where you just kind of clear traffic. Oh no, they wanted us to do the celebration. You know, because at that point, the chief of police at that time, Chief Burbank, he was wearing the colors over the uniform, right? The rainbow colors.
They want you to put multicolored sparklers on your motorcycle?
Pretty much.
Wow.
Pretty much. Because they wanted us to be in the celebration.
But they wanted you to be actively a part of promoting that lifestyle.
They wanted us to be in their speech.
Yeah.
And I said, hey. So I went to another cop and I said, hey, will you switch me spots? Will you be in the parade and I'll do your security assignment? And he says, yeah, no problem. So we switch. And I secured a trade. 1 hour later, I get an email from one of the sergeants that said, there will be no trading positions in this. 100 years policy and anyone can trade. If you get your assignment covered, you can trade. But he sent out an email.
So was this targeting you specifically?
100%. Why would you send that? Why would you say that? I've never seen any email like that. But 1 hour after I get the trade, then he says there will be no trading. So that was a smoking gun on the police department's fault. And so I sent an email back up the chain that said, hey, look, you got to understand that I have no problem protecting this event. I love all people. I love gay people. I said if this was an abortion parade, I would ask not to be in it. And the police should not be in someone's speech. And if they are, let them choose, right? Because the police need to be there to serve and protect and be neutral in these things, okay? Because now you've got this idea that we were talking about, the forced religion by the government, because it is a form of religion. I mean, it's its own following, right? It's its own idea, especially this new sexual revolution, or not new, but it's the same patterns. It's its own forced idea. And when you get the government forcing these ideas, that's why the founders left and started America, right? But people don't understand that. And they don't understand why true diversity means that we can disagree with each other and still love each other. 99.9% of the world or more disagrees with my Latter-day Saint faith. Great. Let's go to lunch. You can say, I believe everything that you believe is a total lie. Wonderful. Let's be friends. You know?
But in government at large, with just this whole social media thing that's been going on, and just everything, it's if you do not fall in line with the narrative, and we kind of have
You're
been
canceled.
seeing that, you are canceled.
Yeah.
And we are seeing it. You know, we have a small media company, but it's a little bit intimidating, and you got to be careful because, and yet you want to be courageous because we're in the last days, and God sent us here to be in the last days and be a warrior. And so that's what I love about you. And I've watched just a little bit of stuff before, but you definitely have that warrior spirit, and you're helping other people kind of man up and woman up, you know, for these times. But anyway, so go ahead with your story.
Well, so I got a text message from the deputy chief that said, we want to see you on, Wednesday. And
so you ended up not doing it, or you did do it?
I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
So the parade's in about a week now.
Okay.
Right? And I get this email back. So after I send the email up saying, hey, look, this goes against what I believe, right? It goes against everything that I believe, everything that I am. And then the chief or the sergeant that said there will be no trading, he sends this email back that's saying you should have no problem being in this parade. We do advocate the LGBT community. So basically he's doubling down. And so a couple days later I get a text from the deputy chief saying, hey, we want to see you in the office. And so now I'm thinking, okay, this is bad, but they're going to give me a choice. I either have to go off the motorcycle squad and go back to patrol, get punished by going back to patrol, or do the parade. That's what I thought was going to happen. But when I got there, the deputy chief and the lieutenant, they took my badge and my gun for discrimination. And a couple days after that, the Salt Lake City Police Department leaked my story to Salt Lake Tribune, and it was all over national news. Officer refuses parade. So now, all of a sudden, I'm all over the news, or at least my story was, that this big bigot that didn't want to protect the LGBT community when the whole story was fake.
The whole thing was a setup.
The whole thing was fake. And I think it was to cover up a sexual harassment case, and that's in my book too, Dispatched.
And we'll put links, by the way,
yeah.
in it so
people
can
I mean, you can get it on Amazon. Like, if you have to hold a book, you can get it on Amazon. But if you would just want to read it for free, it's on my webpage.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Dispatched: Conscience or Conformity. And that's when I'm not a victim. Like, people think, oh my gosh, what happened? Looking back now, I mean, that happened 7 years ago. It was the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, looking back, because I was able to find God on a whole nother level. And also I was able to find myself, to be able to believe in myself. Because I started to, like, I didn't know how I was going to provide, because I resigned. As soon as I was all over the news, I'm like, there's no way you're going to fight against this. I could have sued them big time. Mm-hmm. But when you do that, you give up a few things. Well, first you give up your right to talk about the case, usually. Like, don't talk about it. Because then they try to buy you off. Right? Mm-hmm. Here's 50 grand, go away. And then you can't talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. And then plus all that negative energy of litigation. I didn't want that in my life. And if you fight for your job, well, okay, you might win that, right? You might win A or B, but they're going to get you for X, Y, Z. That's how it works. Mm-hmm. Once you're on their list, you're done. And so I knew, and through prayer, to get out. And so I got out. And then I got into the sales world, and that's when I figured out, like, hey, I'm never going to work for anyone else other than myself ever again. And so I was able to, that's what I mean, I was able to find God on a deeper level. He was able to bless our family. But it was really, really hard. I mean, I still get sad about it when I see cops, because I loved it.
So what is your take, and then we can maybe just talk quickly about some of the things that you've been doing recently. But we have like I tell people, if you thought a year ago we would be where we are now, or a little over a year ago, where we'd so willingly give up our freedoms. Yeah. It to me, it blows me away, because my dad was a Marine, and he always taught us kids, it's a proud thing. He said there's other careers you can do that are going to be maybe a little better than going in the military, but he goes, don't ever be afraid to serve your country. Yeah. And he went in, and several of his friends and buddies, he's the only one that made it out alive or sane, and so he did see a lot of things happen, but he loved this nation. And I've always been taught that this was a very, very special nation. And of course, in Book of Mormon evidence, we know that God, this is where Jackson County, Missouri is going to be, in the New Jerusalem. This is where Adam and Eve were. This is a special land, but we just don't have people that seem to feel that way anymore in leadership. And it's just everywhere you go. I've never imagined that a little over a year ago we would give up. Can you just speak to that a little bit? Yeah, I can.
The Constitution, like and like probably most of your viewers know, the Constitution doesn't give us our rights. Our rights are given by God. And until you understand that, until people understand that they have inalienable rights built inside of them, automatically. It's inside of you. You have the right to life. You have the right to your private property. You have the right to all of these things. They're in us. And the Constitution is there to tell the politicians what they can and can't do. Okay? The Constitution doesn't give you your rights. You already have them. They're there naturally inside of you. It's a natural, universal law. And until you feel that spirit and testimony, why would you fight for that? Because people really believe that the government is in charge of them. They really believe that.
Or Costco's in charge of you.
Whatever. And they really believe that they're doing the virtuous thing by just going along with it. And so this has nothing to do with a mask. It has nothing to do with a vaccine or social distancing or, a new global currency that might come out. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do, in my opinion, with control. Now, that sounds weird, to somebody that hasn't thought through that. But this is a spiritual battle. It's the same battle before we came to earth that has now spilled onto the earth. It's the same exact battle. And what was that over? It was over freedom, and it was over control, and it was over our choice to choose liberty. Freedom and liberty are not the same thing, and people think that they're the same thing, and they are not. Because you can have your freedom and make poor choices, or allow somebody to make poor choices for you, and you're going to be now in bondage. To where we've got 600,000 kids in Utah that are wearing masks on their face over a virus, to where if you're 17 years old or younger, you have a better chance of getting hit and killed by lightning than by dying. Did you know that?
Yeah.
And so now that's called bondage. So freedom plus morality equals liberty.
Like Alex Boyer and Rod Meldrum did a whole thing on freedom and liberty just to show the difference,
And so I don't care if masks did work. I don't care if a vaccine did work, which we know that it doesn't even stop coronavirus now. I don't care. I don't care if a platter that says heaven, here, I'm going to force you to take this and take it, and then you have heaven. In fact, that was already a plan once before, that none will be lost.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of this.
I was just saying, that is the point. And then we were just talking about this the other day, that Satan had this great plan, and we're seeing it in real time right now enacted. Yeah. It's just that they know better, and that it's going to be better for you. You just don't understand it.
And you're gonna take it all in the name of what? Love. All in the name of unity. And so spiritually speaking, this war, and Satan knows that Heavenly Father is about to send his son again for the second time. And when his son comes again, when Jesus Christ comes again to rule and reign as King of Kings for 1,000 years, there is going to be peace. There's going to be voluntarily sharing with each other in this perfect united order of love. Voluntary love, okay? That's what's coming. And Satan knows that. So what does Satan do? Well, he tries to see that plan, and he tries to flip it upside down. And so Satan, he has a different plan right now. And what he's doing, and this is my opinion, right? He's trying to mimic this united order with a world order. Yep. Under government control, under force, under fear, under coercion, all in the name of what? Love. You don't love people because you're not wearing a mask? What? Like, you don't love because you're not going to get a vaccine? Right? You don't love because you're not going to get on this new global currency that looks so great? You don't love? And so therein lies this deception that's happening.
I love you have a great video, and we're going to show just a couple of clips from it, and the kids at the school yesterday saw it. But I love the section you put of Elder Bednar, because I was really relieved to hear that when we finally kind of heard from a church leader say that never again can this happen.
Right.
And he said that, but the part you had in there is so specific about, and you talk about that too, and we'll show that in the video, but you can have a bar, more important, so you got to open a liquor store,
Home Depot.
Yeah, all these things, and yet a church is considered extra fluff that really we don't need.
Non-essential.
Right.
Non-essential. And that's all by design. Because our rights were given by God to assemble. And that's why we did the spiritual. I had this thought, do a spiritual revival. And I was like, oh my gosh. When I was doing all these events, like, I never thought in a million years. Our first rally that we did back in April.
Now tell us, just again, people that don't know, because you're everywhere doing this stuff now, and this has become, but what was the genesis of you getting involved in this?
Snitch line. So Salt Lake City police put up a, Salt Lake City County and the Salt Lake City, they had a snitch line where you could call on your neighbor if you're not social distancing. So I had these officers at the police department calling me, dude, we're going on these calls, like telling neighbors to go away from neighbors.
Wow.
And I was like, it just fired me up. I mean, I'm down in St. George. I have fled Babylon long ago. Well, 2.5 years ago. And I'm down there and I see this and I just had this idea that I'm going to call the snitch line. I'm going to have an event. I'm going to have a rally. Like, you're going to tell us that we can't get the government's going to try to get their police officers to scare people away. We're having a rally. So, and I've never done anything like that before. But I felt like it was the right thing to do. So I called the snitch line and I said, hey, there's going to be a former police officer coming to do a big rally this Saturday. And they said, he can't do that. I said, oh, he's coming. I said, oh, okay, well, he's coming. And so I did a call to action, and we had several thousand people show up. And then I had this idea to create the Utah Business Revival. And the Utah Business Revival was this idea that we were going to go to like parks and just kind of take them over. And all these small businesses were going to, all these non-essential businesses were going to come and bring their booths. And we were just going to shop for them. And then it started picking up steam. Like, people were joining the group, the Facebook group. And now we have like 27,000 people. We should have like 60,000. I mean, but as quickly as people are joining, Facebook's dumping them off the back end.
Yeah, it's
I get
a real thing.
I get the same people like over and over joining again and again and again because Facebook is deleting all of our members.
Well, there's a conservative congressman that, I can't remember, it took him years to get 10,000. He could never break the ceiling. And then as soon as he got out of YouTube and Facebook and went to a more conservative thing, he got like 600,000 or 700,000 in just like 4 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, my Parler, because you know how they canceled Parler, you know, within like 2 weeks, I had like 6,000 people following me on Parler. And on my Facebook, I have 9,000 after like 10 plus years. You know, so they just keep dumping people. And anyway, I don't want to get into all that. So we started doing these big events where we would have like elected officials come speak. We'd have music. And then I had this idea to do a concert, you know, and get a hold of Colin Ray, who I had once opened for 15 years ago. And we put the whole, we got shut down in Kaysville. We got shut down in Grantsville. And then we ended up doing the concert in Iron County. We had over 5,000 people that came to that. And so that's part of the documentary Non-Essential is
we'll put a couple of short clips in, but we'll link to the full one so people can watch it. It's powerful.
Yeah, it is. And so we've been going around with documentary just trying to gather people all around the state so they can feel the spirit of liberty, because liberty, it has an actual tangible spirit to it, you know. So does fear. Fear has a tangible feeling to it. And God created us to gather. God created us as a family unit, all of us to gather, so we can see each other. So
again, Bednar makes that point too. It's fundamental to gathering, you know. And
that's an eternal principle, and throughout eternity we're going to be gathering.
And I feel like I'm supposed to ask you this, and I hope this isn't too sensitive, but we're both LDS, and a lot of our audiences, I think people are surprised. Like when I go to a rally, I'm always surprised who's there, and it's like reassuring. Some of the best people that love freedom, love the Constitution, love this country, love the Book of Mormon, just so many amazing Christian friends we have. They all feel this. It's like they were born for this, and yet we have fellow members of the church that just don't seem to resonate. What would you tell them? Maybe some.
Well, tell who specifically?
I guess people that feel like we shouldn't rock the boat, that we should kind of just go along with the way things are evolving, and you know.
Well, first and foremost, let them have their right to do it, you know. But if we keep going down this path, because everyone has a mission, right? Everyone has their, like, maybe God's telling people to, you know, wear a mask in your shower by yourself. I don't know. There's people driving around in their cars with it
that
on.
cracks me up.
I mean, riding their bikes, a lot out of fear. They're scared. So they, first and foremost, they have their right to do it. Okay, so great. But as we see how unbelievably unconstitutional these mandates and this push from all the global forces were, toilet paper ran out. So if toilet paper runs out, couldn't food run out at one point? So my what I would say to them is, if we ever allow that to happen again, and if everybody just goes along with it, there's going to come a time where it's going to affect them big time. And unfortunately, it's probably going to be when they don't have food, their internet's cut off, and they can't watch, you know, their TV, and their couch is literally taken up from under them. That's when they're going to be like, what? You know? And so I would just say, yeah, they have their right to do it. But I would highly, highly recommend not watching the TV to tell them what they're going to do, because that's what's happened. Now, as far as people in the church, they have their follow this inside, right? I mean, I guess
I'm thinking specifically President Benson. We did a couple ads at Christmas time just showing a prophet of God prophetically talking about a time that would come that seems to be the time right now, because he's talking about freedoms that would be lost and the way they would be lost, and that these Gadiantons, which is what we're seeing. And so I really believe that we're supposed to be, in fact, the Book of Mormon warns us to watch and be careful. And that when we see these things come among us, don't let them get above you. And so...
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. I'm just not going to shame them. Like, it's like, look, and it's hard not to, you know, like with this mask thing, I have such a hard time with it. And the sheeple, you know, I call it we the sheeple. But at the same time, you know, this idea of the wheat and the tares, I don't believe it's whether you wear a mask or whether you don't. I don't believe that's the divide. The divide is, do you still love those that you disagree with? Do you have that love in your heart? Do you have that light inside of you to continue on and listen to your conscience under any circumstance? Because, you know, if you think about the iron rod, what is the iron rod? What is it? Well, it's the Word of God. Well, what's the Word of God? Well, we know that the Word became flesh. And so Christ, Heavenly Father, gave us a gift of Jesus Christ inside of us. Right here. Christ is inside of us. And when we follow Christ, the Word, that's our conscience. And when we go off of our conscience, and when we don't listen to it, which we all do, we're all guilty every day, we now have to justify why we didn't do it. And so my fear that's happening, not just with Latter-day Saints, but anywhere, is that we have taken our hands off of our conscience. We have just let it go. And when we do that, we have to shame and we have to point at those that are doing what we wish we could do. And we have to turn them into the villains. For example, who's the enemy right now? In the mainstream narrative, who's the enemy? Who is it? Well, it's people that voted differently than the mainstream. Anyone who voted differently. 70 plus million, well, I think 80 plus million Americans that voted differently, that have red, white, and blue, that want to make America great again. They're the enemies. So we know that in the last days, right before Christ comes, throughout the scriptures we read about corrupt governments, about secret combinations, right before Christ came the first time. So now if he's going to come the second time, do you think that we don't have corrupt governments and secret combinations?
Exactly.
Who's the enemy? The people that are fighting for our rights? We're the enemy? And so you just got to ask yourself these questions.
And I worry about the youth, the kids. You talk about shaming, and it's just like we're teaching a whole generation of children. If you see a guy without a mask in the store, to fear, or that there is a fearful thing. And in the schools, in fact, with your daughter who's here, you brought her up yesterday on stage and had her tell a little story.
Yeah, my daughter Rachel. Come here, Rachel. So just kind of tell. So Rachel has a story, okay? She has a story to tell about what she has been doing.
So I went up to my dad and I said, how can I be courageous? And then he said to not wear a mask at school. So then it was the next... It was the next day, and then they asked me to put on my mask, and I said, no, thank you.
And so tell them how long. So how long have you been not wearing a mask?
For over a month.
And I don't know, do you want to come up for a second and
Rachel, come on over.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, but
yeah, come on over here, Rach. I love my, what does it say?
I love my brother, but don't tell him I said so.
I love my brother, but don't tell him I said so. Come sit on my So this is my little freedom fighter. She's been going around with me. And so maybe tell.
So I got a question just quick for you. So, yeah, they wear masks at schools, right? And you told a really cute story yesterday. What happened to you?
So I went up to my dad and I asked him, what can I do to be courageous like you? So then he sat there for a moment thinking because he didn't know. So then he said, don't wear a mask tomorrow at school. So then it was the next day, and so then they asked me to put on my mask, but I said no, thank you.
That's awesome.
So how long has it been?
It's been over a month.
A month? Wow. Did you ever think that would happen?
No.
What did you think was going to happen? Didn't know.
So then what about your friends? What happened with your friends at first and then?
So first my friends were making fun of me, and then I got them to not wear their mask.
Started a trend, just like your dad, huh?
Yeah. And so kids need to stand up too, because what are we teaching our youth? Thank you, Rachel, so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for
And so, yeah, so she's, and it's scary, it's like even scary on an interview, because it's like, now what are they going to do? They're going to go after her. It's like now she's the enemy, now she's the enemy. And that's exactly where I believe Satan wants us, is to be, well, you don't love. I mean, I'll get messages from people, I hope you and your family die of COVID-19. And then I'll just send it back. Oh, I thought this was about life. I thought this was about love. It's people want to control others. It's amazing what's happened, and I hope it's a witness to say, if this can happen, well, what's next? Yeah. People think, when you compare this to back in the 30s, Nazi Germany, people hate that comparison. Oh, how dare you? Mm-hmm. And it's like, all right, well, tell me how it's any different. On the principle of control, tell me how it's any different. The Nazis went after, people think that the Nazis went after the Jews because of just their religion. No. They went after the Jews because they were the successful small business entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. They had the money.
Yep.
And that's why they went at, so they were crushing their businesses at first. And then they went after their lives. And then do you know what they did next? They went after the police. Why? Mm. Who are the brown shirts? Mm. Well, if you look at Antifa, they were basically the radical arm, the brown shirts, for the government to come in and riot and loot. It's the same playbook. In fact, they use the same language, non-essential.
Wow. My grandfather served a mission in Germany when Hitler was just barely coming to power, and he remembers listening on the radio, and it wasn't apparent at the time. In fact, he sounded like a pretty decent guy, and it wasn't apparent to even some of the members of the church and stuff. They had to sort this out and figure this out. But he got thrown in jail eventually for taking just photos of Nazis dragging Jews across the street when things were getting ugly, and they threw my grandfather serving a mission in jail. But every time I watch Schindler's List, or I see that, and I see the family that's sitting there, and they don't want things to change, and so they are going to eat their meal even though people are out in the streets getting rounded up, and they're about to get rounded up, but they don't want to believe it. It's like there's this distance in belief. And I feel like some of us here that we want to say we're patriotic Americans, but if we don't have people like what you're doing, Eric, these rights, these things are fragile. They're going to go away. These privileges that God gave us, people forget that it's not government. And so these things, who would have thought over a year ago we'd be in this situation? So we really do appreciate you coming on and sharing this, and we'll put links to the video.
We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Yeah, the governor announced his directive called Stay Safe, Stay Home.
The state of Utah has now seen its first death related to COVID-19.
A big impact to businesses.
A new order mandating which businesses need to close and which are considered essential.
We can mandate it by law.
Not essential. I think you misunderstand the meaning of the word.
Hundreds of people plan to rally in downtown Salt Lake City tomorrow night.
A former Salt Lake City police officer is the one behind the rally and the group Utah Business Revival.
The group calling for businesses in Salt Lake City to reopen is organizing a walk for freedom tomorrow in southern Utah.
That rally's over, but that message is not, and they have a few more things up their sleeves.
Meanwhile, a local group is planning a country music concert in defiance of the state's ban on gatherings of more than 50 people.
As it is now moving the very controversial Colin Ray concert from Kaysville over to Grantsville.
A judge has decided it cannot.
Criminal charges are possible for those who violate Saturday's order.
The event will give non-essential businesses a chance to interact with the public again.
People should not be walking around with masks.
The controversial Colin Ray concert has found a home.
I have faith that the Constitution will be saved, but it will not be saved in Washington. It will be saved by citizens of this nation.
Maybe just to kind of sum up, what message would you like to kind of give people, or how can people get involved? Because this goes all over the place.
Yeah, so I've got, so just in case I do get taken down, so you can follow my Facebook, which I'm not taken down right now because you'll see in the documentary. The link that I want to share is that it's an 888 number that you can text into, and it's 888. So if you text the word liberty to 888-210-6260, then it's signing up for I might send out one text message every couple months, so you're not going to get bombarded, and it's just for me. But text the word liberty to 888-210-6260, and then it'll give you my handles on each platform.
Perfect. So if things do go away, if they've texted ahead of time liberty to that number,
that's right,
then they'll be able to stay in touch.
Yeah, that's right. And then you can go to my website and sign up for free. You can see my blog. You can read my book.
We went yesterday to this school, again, Kimber Academy. We filmed lots of people there. There was people in the streets lined up trying to get in that couldn't get into the session, and there's people out the back, like in the backyard, just peeking in the back. And I even took down the camera a little bit during the video that they showed. People really do care. And maybe I can just close with this. How does it make you feel when you go and have Colin Ray and you see all these good people out there? And what do you think the importance of having a physical event and getting together is?
Well, I look at one of my heroes of the Book of Mormon is Captain Moroni. And people don't understand, I don't even understand what they exactly faced, but I know what he did. You know, and if you look at, you know, in Alma 46, I think it's in 28, it says, "And now it came to pass that when Moroni had said these words, he went forth and sent forth in all parts of the land where there were dissensions, and gathered together all the people who were desirous to maintain their liberty." And so, I get a little, he gathered together all people who were desirous to maintain their liberty, and they came running, right? And so I think that we can take a page out of that book and realize that we can all be Captain Moroni's, you know, we can, at least the spirit of it, you know.
We just had Darren Southam here a couple weeks ago, you know, and he's had things taken down too. He's been battling this as well, but
yeah, he's one of my good friends, Darren. And so we can all be that, you know, we all have roles to play, but liberty is God, and God is liberty, and you cannot have liberty without morality. And it's like, I think it was Benjamin Franklin that said that rebellion to tyranny is obedience to God. Think about that. Rebellion to tyranny is obedience to God. And we're there. I mean, what this happened this was a test run. This last year was a test run. Number one, to see who was going to do what, and to see where you stand. Because you think that when we get back to our Heavenly Father, that everything is... There was a war in heaven when God was God. So that means there's going to be a war all the time. God is a warrior. People don't understand that Heavenly Father is a warrior. And he became who he is because he fought for liberty. And the highest part of the highest kingdom of all is that's where they are liberated. That's where liberty resides. That's where it resides. And Satan wants us to be miserable like unto himself, where there's no identity. And so that's what you're seeing. Spiritually, you're seeing no identity. You can't talk. You can't speak. We're going to take off this whole sexual revolution with, you know, genders. Nobody has genders. Satan wants us to become just like him. Genderless. No body parts. I'm telling you, we're going towards darkness or we're going towards the light. And so that's why I believe it's so important that we talk about these things out in the open, and we can disagree with each other. That's another thing. You can disagree, but you still love each other. And so I guess that's my message, and just keep praying. And what can you do? You pray about it. Because I prayed about it. I mean, I asked what I can do, and I saw all of these events in my head almost a year ago. I saw that we were going to come together and we were going to go around. I could see it after I prayed about it. And so to answer your question, how does it make me feel? I just feel like it's what God wants me to do.
It's been a joy to learn a little more about your mission, and we certainly appreciate you coming and speaking. And we'll put links up. And Eric, you're fantastic.
Thank you.
We keep fighting the fight, and we appreciate you coming today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
When I hear that whistle blowing, I hang my head and cry. Iron County, let's hear it! Solid as a stone, baby, wait and see. I got just one small problem here, a little rough without you. Baby, I'm not me.
Subscribe now